So, greetings. Do without wilt shall be the whole of the law. Today, on this episode of Walk Magic, I'm going to be talking about my transition and how Thelema affected my transition. On the most part, it empowered me. You know, it made dealing with a lot of the stressors a lot easier. Fall is quickly going and winter's coming, and a little bit bundled up today. Got my jacket on, and I just started a second job. I'm waiting for clearance to start working at Columbia, and in the meantime, it's funny, I've been doing my invocations on a very daily basis, usually 2 to 3 times a day of Liber Israel with banishings and a lot of circle castings. And I had filed my last week of unemployment, and the very next day I started orientation at TJ Maxx as a sales associate. So it was just like perfect timing. I went from collecting my unemployment to basically getting the new job, 2 new jobs. One, like I said, I'm just waiting for the background check to go through, which I don't see a problem. I don't foresee a problem happening. So that being said, I'm a little bit tired today. I actually slept in. Today is my first day off after my first week of working. And so for Walk Magic, I'm just walking around the park. Van Vorst Park in Jersey. So flip the camera around. It's actually a really lovely park. You know, I live right around the park. I'm not gonna obviously give my address on YouTube, but I live right across the street from here in one of the buildings, and every day I walk out of the house and I get to have just a little bit of nature. And you know, it's a little bit chilly out today, but there's usually a bunch of families, and it's a lovely area. It's really peaceful, you know. So I'll get some shots of some of the plants that grow here, some of the nature in just a little bit. Let me start off by saying that as far as my transition goes, it's been, let's see, it's about 6 years. I started hormones in 2016. Excuse me, it's been 5 years, you know. And I grew up with a background in Brooklyn where, like, I was a street thug, you know. Trans people were the lowest of the low. They weren't even really talked about. It was more like, if you wanted to insult somebody, you called them a homo or you called them a fag or something, and that was bad enough, you know. Trans people were thought of as like some mentally unstable, mentally ill person that was completely deranged, and like there's something wrong with you. And I got to see a lot of that change over the years in that neighborhood and elsewhere. I like to think I had some tiny part in it just by being myself. So that was my background. It was like extremely frowned upon. Like, as messed up as it is to say, I grew up in a household where my mom had told me from a young age, if you ever bring home a black woman or a man, I'll kill you. Like, that was her mentality, and that's still her mentality. So we don't have a relationship today. She's tried somewhat to like squirm her way into my life, and I've just not had it, because I know deep down she hasn't changed whatsoever. And I'll talk about her in a second. Her and my absent father, who has never been in my life but came in momentarily, as I'll explain, in the most negative of sorts. So that was my growing up. I think one of the greatest places to start is at the beginning, if you're telling a story. So a lot of people ask, when did you know you were transgender? When did you know? And I think, like, for some people, it's a developmental thing. It happens later in life, and they just come to terms with it, and they realize it whenever it is for them. They could be 20, 30, 40, 50 years old or whatever, and they just suddenly have the realization. Then there's another class of people like myself that I've always known. So when I was asked personally when I knew I was transgender, I tell a story from when I was about 3 years old. There was some type of family get-together, and I like to think I have a very good memory because most people don't remember that far back. But I do, maybe because family had told me this story so many times because they thought it was cute for another reason, and I find it hilarious. So there was this woman named Marianne at the family get-together, and she was just like a family friend. Now I was like 3 years old, you know, up to my knees, you know, this tall, and I was wearing like this cute little tuxedo. I've seen pictures of it, and I remember staring up at her, and she was wearing tights and like a skirt, and I remember stroking her leg and thinking, oh my god, I can't wait till I grow up and I have legs like that. It's gonna be beautiful. And I remember, and I've heard the stories from family of them saying, oh my god, he's such a little ladies man, he's feeling her legs, he's gonna be a tiger. And so they thought I was attracted to this woman's legs for a whole other reason than what was going on internally in me. For me, yeah, I wanted those legs, but not in the way they thought that I wanted those legs, you know. P.S. today I've got those legs. So it's kind of funny to me. So I knew from childhood. So when you hear these stories on the news and conservatives protesting, oh my god, they're brainwashing our children, you can't give kids hormones, my life would have been so much easier had I grown up in a loving family who understood what it is to be transgender. We would have had a society at that time that allowed me to get the psych evaluations and the medical assistance that I needed before I went through puberty to get on hormones. I would have had such an easier life. My social circles would have been different. I would not have fallen into deep depression and drug addiction, maybe due to other stuff. You know, like, there's a lot of circumstances. It wasn't just me being transgender that led to drug abuse. You know, it was also growing up in a very hostile household. There was a lot of factors in a very toxic neighborhood. Greenpoint now, Williamsburg as it's called, is a very uppity, upper class neighborhood. And when I was growing up there, it was not that. It was Roman Catholic, Irish, Italian, Polish, and Puerto Rican, and everybody was fighting everybody, you know. It was a very, very alcoholic, drug-induced environment, and a lot of robberies and a lot of just craziness. Everybody was getting fucked up and avoiding their problems and just drinking them away or drugging them away. So, you know, I can't just say if I would have been transgender, but if I would have grown up in a better environment, been able to transition, had parents who were there for me, not down each other's throats, trying to kill each other every weekend when the paycheck came and went because they had to spend it on alcohol and drugs and the bills were barely getting paid, you know, things would have been much different for me. But, you know, it is what it is. I got this incarnation, and it's made me the person that I am today. So, yeah, I'm all for getting children the health care that they need at the age that they need it at. So if they need to start hormones at a young age, I'm all for it, you know. And you could take that as you will. You could be for that or against that. That's on you. But based on my experience, I know that if I would have been able to get on hormones before puberty, it would have made my life a lot easier. So fast forwarding a whole bit, I had already been deep into heroin, crack addiction. I already did one jail bit on Rikers Island for a year. I had been in and out of the system a bunch of times, and I had basically come out of jail, and I was trying to run away from my problems. And I had a friend who was mostly homeless, but I would hang out with him as a teenager all the time and do coke and whatnot. And so when I came out of jail, he was living in Crown Heights, and I reached out to him because he actually saved my life when I was on the run. I was in and out on felony warrants, and I knew I was going to come out of jail and do the same stupid stuff, get into more problems, selling drugs, committing burglaries, whatever the hell I was doing at the time. And so I was just ready to off myself. I already saw the revolving door cycle that people I met on the inside of jail were going through, and I saw clear as day that was going to be my story. It was going to be a revolving door case. So I had made the decision to get $100 from my grandmother, go buy 12 bags of heroin, like 10 bags a bundle was $80. I was going to buy an extra 2, and then hopefully I had an extra couple of dollars or whatever to get a few cigarettes. So my plan was to shoot 2 bags, smoke a couple cigarettes, put the other 10 bags in the needle, and just kill myself so that I didn't have to go through all these warrants and come out of jail a year later after failing programs and everything, and have to do this revolving door cycle, sleeping on concrete for the rest of my life, in and out of jail cells. And I was walking down McGinnis Boulevard after I got the money from my grandmother, and tears were streaming down my face, and I was, you know, about 10 or 15 blocks away from my dope dealer, and from the corner, you know, I was going straight, and from this corner we bumped heads. It was me and my friend Martin, and Martin had a crack pipe in his hand, and he saw me crying, and he was like, "What's going on?" And I explained the situation. I was tired of running with warrants. I was tired of going in and out of programs in jail. I knew that if I completed my jail bid, I was going to do it again, and I was now stuck in the system and the revolving door cycle. I saw it, and I was ready to off myself. And he had essentially said, "Wait, sit with me for a second. That's craziness. Hold on." And he hit his crack pipe, and I saw the smoke come out of him. And when I saw the smoke blow out from his mouth, suddenly I got a craving for that, and also that calling for the other substance that I was addicted to grabbed me. And it was like, I felt okay for a second, and I told him, "You know what? I have $100 on me. Let's go smoke." And so I could honestly say crack cocaine saved my life that day. I don't know how many people could say that as part of their story, but I was ready to kill myself, and seeing him smoke crack gave me a little bit of a scratch between my shoulder blades that I had to itch. And so I went with him, and I blew the $100, and I'm still here today, you know. Martin, however, is not, so rest in peace, you know. He will forever be a brother to me. But I wanted to share that story because I moved in with him after I came out of jail, about 8 months after that period. It might have been a little bit longer. I was still running with warrants, whatever. So let's say a year later. It was February of 2012. I had moved to Crown Heights, and he had gotten his own apartment. He was selling Molly and ketamine and ecstasy and LSD, and he made a big name for himself in Crown Heights. So I saw that when I got out of jail, I was getting hooked on the heroin again, and I moved in with him. And I might have said this part of the story many times before, so I want to actually talk about drug addiction, or at least the rave scene, hallucinogenic part of my drug addiction another time. So I had run away from a heroin addiction as soon as I came out of jail, and I moved in with him, and he helped me get off the heroin with ketamine. And so from there, you know, I started meditating, and I had a couple of very interesting psychedelic experiences. Moving on, I had to get the hell out of that apartment because I had caught another felony. I sold LSD to an undercover DEA agent, and I was facing time in the state penitentiary. So, but there was also, I began to know I was transgender. So how that really happened, how it started to come out more and more, is that I was meditating. I was getting in touch with myself because of the psychedelics. So I had slept with like 1 or 2 people in the rave scene. One was a woman, and then one was a trans woman. And just playing the role of a man sexually was just not for me. I was not getting off. I had a girlfriend prior to going into jail for like 1.5 years, and we were having sex, and I could never get off. It was just so uncomfortable for me. It was like a closet case, you know? It was not me. So those were learning lessons, and it started to become more apparent to me. I had to make a change in my life, but I was terrified. And also I needed to clean my life up after I'd seen New Wheat, and I needed to get out of the rave scene. So I ended up moving back to Greenpoint, and I told my aunt from my father's side of my family and my absent father that what was going on generally, that I was kind of homeless. And she said, "Well, if you stop using today and you go to an outpatient, I'll let you stay at my house until we can help you figure something out." And of course I couldn't stop using, but I went to the outpatient, and somebody got me into rehab there. And while I was waiting to go to the rehab for a couple of weeks, I started to go to the 12-step program, and I had my first little eye-opening experience there of seeing one of my mother's PCP addicted friends, now sober 2.5 years in the program. And this was a guy that lived on my couch in Brooklyn. you know, with my mother in her apartment downstairs on the bottom floor. So seeing him clean after I saw like how fucked up and desperate he was on heroin, crack, and PCP, if he could do it, shit, I could do it. And suddenly that became like my first little spiritual awakening, that I saw what the problem that I had in this person, and he was able to deal with it, and I believed that I could do it too, you know. So I started to listen to what they were saying in the 12-step program. Suddenly my ears opened, and I started to see, okay, I need to get in touch with a higher power of my understanding, right, as they tell you in that program. So I couldn't stay sober because I had come out going to an outpatient after rehab. I came out as bisexual, but I told myself that, hey, that transgender shit, I'm taking to the grave. I'm not addressing that. There's no fucking way. Depression hit. I was coming up on the 4th step, where you have to do a very big moral inventory of yourself and all your resentments and every conflict you ever had with anybody, see what your part in it was. I knew that I would have had to put myself on that list if I was going to be honest and really embrace the program, and, you know, share that I hated myself because I'm transgender and I've been taught to hate myself, you know, and I couldn't do that. So when it was time to do the 4th step, I ran. I started getting high again because I was depressed. Not being able to be myself really caused serious depression. And so I relapsed. I had this felony over my head. I was no longer going to an outpatient program. They wanted to give me long-term residential care because now I'm shooting coke again and shooting heroin, and I'm a mess. I'm on the, you know, on the brink of death again, and living in a halfway house. And so they told me you could either go to jail, you could go to a program for long-term. And I chose state. I chose state time. I knew I was going to mess the programs up. I didn't have the strength to stay in the programs. As soon as something came up, I was going to run. So I actually went into Rikers Island with a bundle of heroin stashed on me. And I chose not to go on methadone that time. I always went to C95 where they gave you methadone detox. But this time I chose to go to OBCC, where it's mostly gang members and violent crimes, but of a minimal sort, you know, armed robbery or assaults or stuff like that. A lot of blood gang members. So I always avoided going there because I was always with the drug addicts. This time I went there, and people saw like, holy shit, this person's a heroin addict, get this motherfucker out of here. And I told them, no, don't tell the guards, I got this. And I ended up getting my hands on about a 1/4 ounce of weed. I did the heroin by the time I got to my bed, 24 hours on Rikers Island. Like, I had that bad of an addiction, I couldn't even hold on and detox myself the way I planned to. But I did have a pouch of cigarettes, and I had phone calls, and I had some money in my commissary I could trade off. So somebody had a lot of weed, so I was buying weed and we were smoking together. And people saw like, holy shit, this person's like, there's something about this guy that a normal heroin addict isn't going to be able to do that. And they respected me, you know. And so from the intake house smoking weed, I kicked heroin. And one of the bloods, he was like, I don't know, like the 2nd or 3rd level blood. There's levels to it, you know. He ended up in the permanent house with me while we were both waiting to get sentenced and go upstate. And he said, yo, I have so much fucking respect for what you did. The fact that you didn't just cave and go back to heroin addiction, you got off the methadone, you didn't want to go to C95. You're not a normal person. Most people can't do that. That takes an extreme amount of willpower. Yo, you're with me from now on. So I ended up hanging out, cooking with the Bloods. And I actually got put on the house gang, which is a privilege that if you're not in a gang or you're not somebody special, you don't get the house. Not only that, I was in the first bed. And I realized like a couple years later, when you're in the first bed, the house is yours. That means that the Bloods in the house deferred the house to me. That means if I said something, it went. And it did. And I kept things kind of peaceful. I settled a bunch of conflicts for people. I had a head about me. I ended up reading J.R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones, and I read a lot of stuff like 48 Laws of Power, Machiavelli, anything that I could get my hands on to learn, especially how to move chess pieces to keep myself safe. I was about it. So I started reading those type of books, and I started to apply the lessons that I was learning. And by the grace of whatever's been watching my back, the holy guardian angel or whatever powers that be, I made it out of jail without ever really getting in anything serious, never getting robbed, always having respect, and ended up in some really safe houses where I was never too worried about much. So here's where Thelema kind of came into play for me. I had been upstate for well, I'd been in jail over a year at this point. I had about 4 months to go. I think I was doing 17 months in 6 days, and I had already done about 13 months. So I was reading a lot, and I had read the Da Vinci Code, and I remember reading that he was part of a fictitious secret society in the book, the Priory of Sion, and they used pentagrams, and he was gay. So I had realized, well, I had searched for my spirituality through all the other religions, Christianity. I was talking to people in the Islam, Buddhist, whatever religious materials I could read, I was studying. And there was the Wiccan group, and I thought maybe I'll check them out one day, but I don't really know. I don't know if that's really for me, what it is. I don't know too much about it. But once I read that book and I saw the pentagrams and him being gay, I figured, well, if not in here, maybe when I get out, I could be myself, and I could find a spirituality in that faith, Wicca, that I could be myself. And so, based on reading that one book, I decided to sign up as a guest and go there. And when I was talking to the people, really this one person, Kenneth Couch, who is now Vivian A. Ward, or Vivian J. Ward, he at the time was in the closet transgender and started throwing out these gay jokes, but also taught me about the religion Thelema as much as he could, and Hermeticism and the occult and the Kabbalah, and I read every book they had there. But he was throwing out a lot of like kind of quirky little gay jokes, and seeing how the other people there were laughing and kind of accepting it and not really giving a hard time. So I decided I was doing the 12th step really hard, and I had written the 4th step, and I put myself on there as trans, and I decided I was going to do that 5th step with that person. And I came out to them as bisexual, and when I did that in the yard, doing the 5th step, reading off all the names and resentments I had, and I got permission from the sponsor back in Brooklyn that I was writing, the same person that got me into the rehab and was my sponsor in Brooklyn before I relapsed, because I wouldn't come out as trans in the depression. I had told them by mail, hey, I'm going to do the 5th step with this person, but I'll do it again with you when I come out, and I got the go ahead, so I did it. And when I came out as bisexual, Kenneth said, hey, I'm trans, and that blew my mind. Now I came out as bi first, so that this way, if this person wasn't who I thought they were, if I couldn't trust them, then, you know, I at least had some leeway. Like, okay, the person's bi, whatever, and they're not fucking around with anybody in the jail, they're not making any mess. If it got out, it would be okay. Now, when this person confided in me, I decided that later when we met back up in the yard to talk about Wicca and religion and whatever else, I was going to tell them the rest, that I was transgender. And when I did that, the next time we met at Wicca, they handed me a stack of papers, you know, like from my knee up to here. It was like a whole pile of papers of personal stories of trans people in and out of the system, medical opinions on how to go about the process, everything and anything you could think of about being trans, community terms, psychological papers, everything. Stuff from the DSM-4 and 5 printouts, just everything. So that week I took home half of the papers, read them. The next week I came back, brought them back to him, and he gave me the rest of the papers, and I read through all of those, and newspapers that had submissions with the articles for trans people and stuff. And so I got to learn everything I needed to learn. So it was kind of like I got Thelema, I came out as transgender, I was told about the Book of the Law. I got like this whole package deal, as if like this person was planted in my life by the Holy Guardian Angel to help me on my way. You know, they were there to kind of help me come out and give me the initial steps on my path of what I needed to do as soon as I came home. And so I now started to get very interested in Thelema. When I came home, I was reading a lot of Crowley and Israel Regardie and any books that they recommended in their books. I would get my hands on and read, and I was digging through as much stuff as I could. I joined OTO temporarily. I was going to the Lamp of Invisible Life, where I met my partner that I'm with today. He was running that ritual and mini organization, and I'm now a member of the congregation. I've taken oaths into it. And so there's some really cool things about Thelema that once I got out, really helped me. Now, I have a video with Frater Orpheus from California on his book, On the Rights of Man. and it's all about Libre and how it was crafted, and some opinions on the metaphysical aspects of Libre. And so I'll be publishing that hopefully in the next week or so. So in the meantime, I'm shooting this. Now, Libre helped me so much, because it told me I could be who I am, and I need to aggressively be myself at any cost. It is better to be myself. The commentaries on L, it is better that I go through life as a trans person facing persecution, or being thought by peers or other people that I'm crazy and doing this as for whatever reason, that trans people aren't real, they are a mentally unstable anomaly that should not exist. Whatever people think about me, it does not matter. Even if I feel at times that, hey, me being transgender is not actually okay, I still need to be myself. I need to be true to myself at any and all costs. I need to aggressively be myself. So Libre did that. The Book of the Law helped me do that. The commentaries on L helped me do that. And in a moment, I'll read some quotes from various books, and from like the confessions and stuff. Like, there's some really awesome things that I started to read that started to help me come in touch with myself. That, you know, a whole person is not just one gender. It is a fluid aspect of all of creation, and all of creation has these polarities. There's the sun and the moon, you know, there's the air and the earth, there's masculine and feminine in all things. Everything incorporates the Tao Te and the yin yang, you know. So to be a perfected person, you really need to come in touch with how much, I guess how I could say it is, how much masculine and femininity you have within yourself. And I doubt that there's anybody alive that is strictly 100% male. Now, if that's you, great, you need to be that. If you're 100% female, you need to be that. But if you have mixed traits of some type of androgynous nature, you need to be that, you know. And I'll talk about some aspects of like Yod He Vav He in a moment, you know. So I started to read a lot of Crowley, and I decided, you know, it was about a year out of jail and I was on parole. So I was nearing the end of my parole, so I had been going to the LGBT center as part of my, for an outpatient program for rehabilitation, and to help me find work and get vocational help. And I chose to go there so I could get therapy on myself for being trans, and I could meet people that are like me, and I could hear people's stories, and I was participating in groups, and I met some great people over the years going there. Some of them are still in my life today, you know, I talk to them on a fairly frequent basis. Now, I remember not knowing, like, how the heck am I gonna pay for hormones? Like, this is, you know, I don't know what to do. Like, it's expensive. I needed surgeries. I needed breast implants. I needed SRS, sex reassignment surgery, and I had no clue how to go about doing any of this financially. And I just kept trusting the process, you know. I kept on the spiritual path. I kept doing my invocations and my banishings and my meditations and my asana and my pranayama, and the work of any orders that I was in, and my own personal work. I had a teacher named William Allen Wheeler. We crafted a system together, and he was super supportive. He was a long-term, lifelong LGBT activist on the West Coast in Oregon. So he was very helpful, helping me come to terms with my identity, and I didn't have a name picked out at first, so he started calling me Kit, which at first it annoyed me, and then I started to find it cute. And he said, until you pick a name, I want to call you this, because I see it as like a gender neutral name, and I think it'll help you come to terms with changing your name, you know. And it did. In his own weird way, it did. He did help me with that. At first it was like gut-wrenching, and then I got used to it, and it made me picking the name Alexandra and being called Lexi a lot easier as time went on. So I was worrying about how am I going to pay for any of this, and I knew that I needed to make a medical appointment at a transgender clinic. And as soon as I did that, and I made that first initial step forward, de Blasio in New York changed the laws for Medicaid and said trans people, hormones are going to be paid for by Medicaid, or any state or federal insurance is gonna, any insurance has to pay for hormonal replacement therapy in New York City. Now when that happened, I was ecstatic. Now my next concern, now that I'm on hormones, is how am I going to pay for these surgeries? And I just kept pushing forward. I kept telling people in the doctors and stuff, that I needed these surgeries. And lo and behold, the inertia of the universe, as Crowley says, a person doing their true will has the inertia of the universe to assist them. Suddenly, all like out of nowhere, again, the laws on Medicaid got federally changed, and now any insurance has to cover your surgeries. At least in New York State. I don't know how it is elsewhere, but I was able to get my surgeries free of charge. I was able to get my name changed free of charge. In fact, I got a pro bono lawyer that did the name changes not only for free, their company paid for all the taxi rides to and from court and everything, and it was such an easy experience. And I remember on the day I was going to get my name changed, Trump had just got put into office, and so everybody's freaking out. And I posted one of my first pictures as Lexi, wearing like a short skirt, like a short dress, you know, with stockings or pantyhose and high heels, and saying, today I go to get my name changed. It was like 2 days after after the election, so he wasn't yet the president, but he was coming in. It was confirmed that he won the election in 2016, and it was just me doing my will. And I remember the people on my Facebook when I posted that picture and that, hey, I'm going to get my name changed, it was just like a beacon of hope for people, like, okay, the world's still going on, things are going to get dark, but there's still hope. So it was kind of cool. I got to be that little beacon of hope and get some positive attention for the day, you know. Here I have a couple of quotes that, one I got from the Confessions, it's one of my favorite quotes, and the other ones I got from thelemaquotes.com. And so the first one I'll read off is Liber LXV, chapter 5, verse 44. This constitutes a profound riddle of holiness. Those only understand it who combine in themselves the extremes of moral idea, identifying them through transcendental overcoming of the antinomy. They must have gone further yet, beyond the fundamental opposition of the sexes. The male must have completed himself and become androgyny, the female and become gynandr. This incompleteness imprisons the soul. To think I am not woman but man, or vice versa, is to limit one's self, to set a bar to one's motion. It is the root of the shutting up, which culminates in becoming Mary inviolate or a black brother. Next is a commentary to the Book of the Law, chapter 1, verse 51. The beast 666 ordains by his authority that every man and every woman and every intermediately sexed individual shall be absolutely free to interpret and communicate by self by means of any sexual practices soever, whether direct or indirect, rational or symbolic, physiologically, legally, ethically, or religiously approved or no, provided only that all parties to any act are fully aware of the implications and responsibilities thereof and heartily agree thereto. Magick in Theory and Practice, chapter 21. The devil is historically the god of any people that one person dislikes. This has led to so much confusion of thought that the beast 666 has preferred to let names stand as they are, and to proclaim simply that Iwas, the solar phallic hermetic Lucifer, is his own holy guardian angel, and devil, the devil, Satan or Hadith of our particular unit of the starry universe. This serpent Satan is not the enemy of man, but he who made gods of our race, knowing good and evil. He bade know thyself and taught initiation. He is the devil of the Book of Thoth, and his emblem is Baphomet, the androgyny, who is the hieroglyph of arcane perfection. The Confessions, chapter 2, one of the last paragraphs of chapter 2. This is about the prophet writing his autohagiography, which is an autobiography of a saint, and he writes about himself. While his masculinity is above the normal, both physiologically and as witnessed by his powerful growth of beard, he has certain well-marked feminine characteristics. Not only are his limbs as slight and graceful as a girl's, but his breasts are developed to quite abnormal degree. There is thus a sort of hermaphroditism in his physical structure, and this is naturally expressed in his mind. But whereas in most similar cases the feminine qualities appear at the expense of manhood, in him they are added to a perfectly normal masculine type. The principal effect has been to enable him to understand the psychology of women, to look at any theory with comprehensive and impartial eyes, and to endow him with maternal instincts on spiritual planes. He has thus been able to beat the women he has met at their own game and emerge from the battle of sex triumphant and scatheless. He has been able to philosophize about nature from the standpoint of a complete human being. Certain phenomena will always be unintelligible to men as such, others to women as such. He, by being both at once, has been able to formulate a view of existence which combines the positive and the negative, the active and the passive, in a single identical equation. Finally, intensely as the savage male passion to create has inflamed him, it has been modified by the gentleness and conservatism of womanhood. Again and again in the course of this history, we shall find his actions determined by this dual structure. Okay, so I just read off several quotes from both the Holy Books of Thelema, the Commentary on El, and the Confessions, Chapter 2. Now, I got some interesting points out of that, and they affected me, and I hope that they affect other people. Not just people who primarily identify as transgender, but all people, especially those practicing Thelema. And there's going to be a lot of far-right leaning Thelemites who are not going to want to hear this, and that's on them, and that's fine. Now, it says right in the quote from Liber LXV chapter 5 that in order to attain perfection, the person who is assigned male at birth needs to come to terms and identify as androgynous in order to become a complete being. For a person assigned female at birth, in order to become a complete person, they need to be a gynander. Now, or identify as a gynander, which is like a woman leaning towards male androgyny, or androgynous. It's a strange term. They didn't have the words that we have today. And I'm gonna say this, you know, there's a lot of talk in the media the past 5-10 years about transgender people, thinking like, oh, these people just came out of nowhere and they're insane and there's no such thing as trans people. And it's like, no, we've always existed. It's just that we've taken control of the narrative today. We don't allow cisgender people who identify with what they were assigned at birth gender-wise. We don't allow them to dictate who we are today. We have control and we have the say over who we are as an individual. They do too, but they don't have say over me. They could say whatever the hell they want about themselves, and that's fine. But they have no say about us. We've been around since the beginning of time. You have the Baphomet of the Templars. That goes back almost 1,000 years at this point. Supposedly. We also have Hermaphroditus of the Greeks, who goes back several thousand years. Like, trans people have always been around. Hermaphroditic people have always been around. There's really no such thing as a hermaphrodite, let me say that. A hermaphrodite is what we now call intersex. They have the appearance of both genders of the genitalia. In no case has it ever been recorded, as far as I've been made aware, in any medical study anywhere of any child being born with the ability to procreate by themselves, because they have both the testes, which produce sperm, as well as the womb with the eggs and the ovaries that can produce the child once the sperm enters it. That does not exist. You will have a person with an extended clitoris who may have a vagina and a penis looking, or they may have balls and some type of clitoris. Like there could be weird stuff along those lines, but they're called intersex, and normally they don't even get a say in it. Their parents pick their sex at their birth based on whatever they want, and then they're given hormonal replacement therapy to help that process along. And a lot of those people grow up, and I've met several of them that suddenly learn that they were intersex, and they've already been working on transitioning because that is not how they identify. Come to find out, their parents picked their gender at birth, and it's like it messes them up because that was not who they were in the first place, and somebody who had no clue what this child really was, they pick it for them. So that's intersex. Hermaphrodite is intersex back in the day before we had the medical terms that we have today. That was just a little side tangent. This rubs a lot of conservatives the wrong way, and I find it hilarious. But if you're a Thelemite and you dislike trans people, or you think trans people don't exist, The prophet of Thelema says he's transgender. He was assigned male at birth, and he's telling everybody in his own autobiography that he has both sexes in him. He's androgynous. He may not need hormonal replacement therapy or surgeries or anything along those lines to transition, but he's not identifying as purely male. Therefore, he had to transition. He had to take a good look at his own internal nature, his internal structure, discover who he is, and then he decided to share that. You don't have to share that if you don't want to, but he made a point of sharing that, hey, I have physical and internal qualities that are both male and female. He's androgynous. Point blank, the prophet of Thelema is transgender, and I don't think you can argue against that. Like, he says it in his own words without the proper terminology of today's world. But he has other passages that he wrote in the holy books that confirm these same ideas. That, hey, existence has both natures. It's positive and negative, male and female, passive and assertive, or passive and active, right? And what's really interesting about that is how we could break down some of the formulas, and exoteric schools have really muffled this up so bad, so bad. Let me explain. Kether on the tree of life is the divine light. Beyond that contains the Ein Soph and the Ein Soph Or, the limitless light, limitlessness, and nothingness, right? There exists the potentiality in the Kabbalistic zero for everything. It's a state of androgynous that's beyond androgynous, because it does not yet exist. It's before the Big Bang. If you wanted to apply that to something physical to kind of wrestle with it, it is exactly 0.000 infinite zeros 1 negative 0.00001 seconds before the Big Bang, and everything before that, that is what the Ein Soph Or is. It's the potential for all of existence to occur. It crystallizes itself in that light that explodes, right? Again, just applying this to something physical. This is spiritual. It's not really physical, but I'm giving analogies and allegory of the physical world so that you could grasp what I'm talking about. Symbols, okay? That light in Kether is androgynous. The archetypal man, Adam Kadmon, is androgynous. The Elohim are androgynous, right? They're probably the only hermaphroditic spiritual entities that it would be accurate to call hermaphroditic in that sense, right? Then we have this Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey scenario, which Yod is fire, and it's not literal fire, it's spiritual hermetic fire, it's elemental. It symbolizes aspiration, divine thought, right? The fiery nature of thought towards the heavens, this aspiration towards Godhood. You have the Hey, so the Yod is in Chachma, it's the paternal father. At first it's androgynous, and then it breaks off, and the feminine quality, we analyze it in Bina, right? That's the divine mother. She has within her womb all the potentials that get born below the abyss, which become the Vav and the Hey final, right? The Vav is symbolized as the solar heart, and the Hey final and the Ruach in the heart. The Hey final is Malkuth, and that stands upon the world of shells, which is the closest thing to physical matter that we have on the tree of life, right? We have two really good documents in the Golden Dawn that are also published in the Equinox, and I think that they're easily misconstrued now if you're looking at them exoterically. And those two documents I'm talking about are the Garden of Eden before the fall and the Garden of Eden after the fall. Before the fall, the tree of life is in perfection. There's an androgynous God above the abyss, looking down upon Adam and Eve. Adam is standing upon the shoulders of Eve on the cross of suffering, holding up the pillars, and Eve has her feet on Malkuth and is supporting Adam. Now in the Bible, Adam is an androgynous being, made in the likeness of the Elohim. He had both sexes in him. The rib was ripped out. Female was made from his rib. Now, if you're looking at this exoterically and you're taking this literal, this is why the patriarch has been so monstrous to women over the years, let alone LGBT people. They're taking this text and thinking, oh, well, man is perfect and the female was part of man and she's on the tree of life below him. And no, that's not correct. Esoterically, all of these things are symbols. That Yod-Heh Vav-Heh is the suits of the tarot. Inside you, each and every single one of you is every card in the tarot deck. You are the microcosm. You contain all qualities of the universe. You contain the solar nature, that's right up here, and you contain the moon. When you read texts like the Garden of Eden before and after the fall, the symbol of Adam and Eve, if you're a male, you should identify with Adam and Eve. If you're a female, you should identify with Adam and Eve. They're trying to tell you something about your internal qualities, your true nature. If you don't have the interpretation of, if you're not looking at the qualities of male and female in any of these texts, like the Garden of Eden, or if you're not incorporating male and female qualities from Yod-Heh Vav-Heh into your life, you're going to find yourself an incomplete being. These things are symbols. What's been attributed to women, like the emotional nature of the cup, which could be the hay above the abyss and bina. That's your emotional purity. Even though it's listed as a feminine quality, you have that in you as a male. Just like you have the princess card of the earth, the hay final, that's part of you. These are all symbols that are part of you. So you really have to incorporate the Keter is in Malkuth. And when we say Keter is in Malkuth and Malkuth is in Keter, that's also implying that everything on the tree of life is also within Malkuth and Keter. They're all superimposed on top of each other. Kabbalistically, we're able to kind of stretch it out into a 4-tier tree of life where you have the world of Atzilut, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asaya. You know, we're able to analyze these 4 aspects of the world, of the tree of life, based on the elements and kind of pick it apart. But everything is within everything. It's all that Kabbalistic zero. It's all the one of Keter. It's a matter of breaking past all of the structures and indoctrination by the exoteric schools that our society has embraced over the past couple thousand years. You know, Christianity and present-day Judaism has really done a number on messing up these interpretations. They've condemned women, they've condemned LGBT people, they've justified racism based on certain doctrines that they're misinterpreting. You know, the Bible is a symbol. Those stories are allegory. They're meant to learn, not to oppress people. You shouldn't oppress people, whether they're a woman or a black person from African descent or an indigenous person who is native to the Americas. Like, no, don't oppress people because the Bible tells you to. If you do that, you're doing that. You could blame it on a book, but you're doing that. You are karmically responsible for your actions, you know. So we have in Thelema these ideas that in order to become perfected, you must embrace the yin and the yang. You have to learn that you have both of these qualities in you. You have to come to terms with the fact that you are somehow at your highest level of potential androgynous. And when you've done that, you'll be on my level. Joking. He's joking. No, you'll be on your level, you know. For sake of conversation, I don't go around telling people to call me they or anything, but I identify primarily as androgynous. I don't consider myself strictly feminine. I don't go about trying to change my voice to make it sound more feminine because I'm okay with it. That's who I am. I'm okay with myself as I am. I change certain things to make my physical appearance match how I interpreted my internal nature. Once I did that, you know, I made the changes necessary, and what I felt was unnecessary, I left alone. So I identify actually as not just transgender female, but as androgynous. But for sake of conversation, she is fine. You know, I don't go trying to make things difficult for anybody, and I usually don't share that in most talks with people unless I really know them, or unless in a situation like this where it's applicable. You know, so it's just things that Thelema has given me, you know. It's helped me really analyze myself. There's a lot of tools that, when it came to transitioning, have been really helpful. I guess I could share just one last little thing, and it's pertaining to Libra Oz, which, if you're not familiar with Libra Oz, you need to read more. Read Libra Oz. Memorize Libra Oz. When I was in early transitioning, I was so scared of the world, like terrified. The first month or two of actually being full-time Lexi, dressing as a female and everything, once the hormones kicked in and my physical appearance started to change, God, I was scared every time I went out of the house, or especially like I went on the subway and it was very bright. You know, people look at me, like, I was terrified. I couldn't tell what they were thinking, if I was in danger, if this person's gonna attack me, if they're clocking me and they know I'm trans, or what was going on in their heads, or if they're sexually attracted to me, if that could be a problem. Like, you know, it's just a whole mess of anxiety going on. Just leaving the front door, I used to have to use Libra Oz, and thank God for Libra Oz. Thank Crowley, thank the great B666 for Libra Oz. Before leaving the house, I would have such anxiety, and one of the ways I learned to curb it was by repeating as a sort of mantra, man has the right to dress as he will, man has the right to dress as he will, man has the right to dress as he will. And anytime the anxiety would start to kick up in me, I would just think of that line, like, hey, I have the right to be myself. It's okay. I've come to terms with my identity. I've done work. I know who I am based on my internal nature. And if I have to face any external consequences for that because somebody's crazy and doesn't like it, I'm willing to do so. And slowly but surely, you know, at first for me, like, it was a process of having people around me that accepted me, and they showed me acceptance and love. And eventually it got to a point that I accepted me and I loved me. And it took years. It took like 4 or 5 years until it came to a point where I don't have anxiety today, you know? The first 4 or 5 years I had serious anxiety every time I left the house. If there was a mirror, I had to look into the mirror to see, like, wait, what's looking back at me? Is it feminine looking? Is it masculine looking? How am I being perceived by every single person that's on the street, you know? And it was maddening. Like, it was a constant state of fear. But slowly and surely, I came to terms with my identity. And today, I'm not that person who's living in any type of fear. In fact, like I said, I accept me. And yeah, I use other people to give me acceptance and love until I had that acceptance and love. But yeah, thank goodness for Libra Oz. You know, that was pivotal in my transition. And reading Libra L, and some of the quotes that I shared before were amazingly instrumental to my transition. So I'm just so grateful that I found Thelema, that I'm transgender, and that I'm in a position today where I could kind of share my story or my thoughts. And you know, I hope that people come to terms with their own identities and we get to a point where there's no oppression. I do at times feel like the LGBT movement is dead in the water right now. Like, they got, the gays and lesbians got the marriage equality and adoption rights. They left the trans people to kind of fend for themselves a few years later and get the medical stuff that we need. And then the movement died. Like, what is happening? When do you hear LGBT in the past 5 years? Just a couple negative things. We lost the right to be in the military, which I hope has been reversed at this point. I'm not even sure. Anytime you heard anything LGBT, it was going in the opposite direction from where we were going 10 years ago. And so it's kind of like, I have a few burning resentments against that community. Community is a funny word, right? It's like community. I don't see community today. I see people that were out for themselves, used each other out of convenience, and as soon as that convenience was done, screw everybody else. Screw the next generations. They'll get it for themselves or they won't. We got what we wanted and that was enough. And I don't see a movement today. I don't see an LGBT movement, and it's really frustrating. But that's besides Thelema, and that's besides my story, you know. But I wanted to share that at some point in this video because, you know, I do think it's applicable. So before I go on ranting about anything else, I'm just gonna say love is the law, love under will. If there's anything else I could think of about transitioning, that I think is helpful. I'll share it at a later time. But I said my piece for today, so all the best to you. Later.